Welcome this afternoon, everybody. I hope you're well, and thank you for joining me for Mastering Leadership. I'm Sarah Wilson, and I'm a leadership coach, predominantly helping women with imposter syndrome, but also working with social housing providers to help them to get better diversity in their leadership teams in order to make more innovative decisions and comply with the new regulations. So thank you so much for joining me, whether you are live or whether you are on catch up. I hope you'll get something out of this. So let's chat about what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to start with the importance of focusing on you as a leader and how important it is to kind of start inside. We're going to start a bit about the joy of standing out. Standing out is a great thing once you've acknowledged what skills it is that you bring to the table that might be a little bit different. Your leadership style, building a team, and how to get the job done. So let's dive on with that today. The more I wrote of this, the more I realized that there's so much more. And there may well be now a series of these that come to you based on the fact that I can only go into so much detail on this. I want to do some others that are really sort of getting into the nitty-gritty of those topics and really helping you to become a great leader. So let's make a start. So we're going to start off with emotional intelligence. And there's a reason that we're going to start off with that. And that is because I'm delivering and facilitating leadership training across a number of organizations, a number of sessions. And there's a big shift. There's a big shift in the content of that. And a lot of it is around emotional intelligence and just going in and being very sort of forceful and commanding with your staff is no longer the most appropriate way. I don't think it ever was the most appropriate way to get the best out of people and to help them to grow and empower them. Now it's much more about emotional intelligence, empathy, role modeling, going to where people are and working with them instead of bossing them around and telling them what to do. So I think that's really important to note. And there aren't any training sessions that I'm facilitating at the moment where the emotional intelligence side isn't actually a big part of that training. So I think it's really important to be talking about emotional intelligence as a massive part of leadership skills and how important they are. And it's one of the reasons that I wanted to help people to get into leadership is because if you get a bunch of men together and a bunch of women together, they make very different decisions in terms of what they can do in terms of innovative thinking. And of course, if you've got more people around the table with more diverse backgrounds, more diverse in terms of their own story, then you're going to get other ideas and thoughts coming to the table that you possibly didn't have before. So let's make a start on one of the key parts of emotional intelligence, which is self-awareness. So self-awareness can be quite a scary thing, and it's the reason why I'm starting with it. Self-awareness, for me, probably didn't massively exist until I started my own personal development journey. And that was into my early 30s, really. So I wasn't terribly self-aware in terms of how I was coming across in a very realistic way. I was very hard on myself, quite sensitive, knew that I irritated people, but the realistic thing of irritating people was that I was trying to play the part that I thought somebody else wanted me to play, not really embracing who I was myself. So in terms of self-awareness, it's important to get a good, realistic feel as to how you come across to other people. So, how do they view you as their leader? This can work with any relationship, by the way. So a lot of the things that I talk about today, you can take holistically into your own lives. So how do you come across without being mean to yourself, without being really critical of yourself, but just to kind of get an idea of, if you think you are very empathetic, why not ask your team, do I come across as empathetic? How would you describe me as a manager? If you want to kind of leave it really broad and see what they come up with. And there may be areas that you acknowledge for yourself, but there may be different things that they see that you maybe don't. So how realistic are you about you? Are you aware of how you are affected by certain triggers. So let's say, for example, that on the way to work, you're working in person at the office. On the way to work, there is a problem with the traffic, or there's some sort of incident whilst you're driving into work, like road rage and what have you. If you're then late to work, how does that impact on you? How does it impact on how you feel? How does it impact on your behaviour? And what therefore is the impact on the people that you're working with when you get in? So having good self-awareness is a key part of emotional intelligence, but it's important that it doesn't move into being really self-critical. That's not what it's about. It's about having a realistic image of, do I know what my behaviours are like? Do I know what triggers me? And do I know how I'm going to act, behave, and like what my energy level is going to be like if there are certain triggers that happen? Like when I come out of a meeting, if I've been frustrated, how do I then portray to my team how I'm feeling? Do I portray it? Do I hide it? When should I hide it? So let's say, for example, if you've come out of a really challenging meeting, but you can't then share with the rest of the team, it's okay to say, right, I need a cup of tea and it's time to breathe. But obviously coming into your team and ranting about it isn't something that you're going to want to do, particularly if actually there's elements of the meeting that you can't share with them. You just need to bear in mind how you might get your game face back on in order to work with your team and not negatively affect them. I'm not saying don't be open and don't be transparent. I'm just saying you need to work out where your line is. The next part comes in with how you feel about yourself in terms of self-validation. So I have been in a number of roles, a number of jobs where getting other people's validation was really important for me. And as my personal development and confidence grew, the need for that lessened, which actually was great because I could celebrate myself. Not in an icky, conceited way, which I'll talk a bit more about in a second, but just in a, I did a good job there and I know I did. Just in a very self-assured, calm kind of way. So do you seek validation from other people? Are you constantly wanting feedback, praise, etc.? And I remember a few years ago in my last corporate job that I worked in, the job that I worked in meant that you were continually getting feedback on very nitty-gritty bits. I was working in policy, and if you're writing policy and process, it has to be as good as it possibly can be when it first goes out to people. And so, of course, you'd get, you get pulled up for a spelling error, a grammatical error, very little things sometimes. And also, have you thought about how this would work in the field? Because actually I'm reading it like this. So you're getting really in-depth detail. And I remember saying to my boss, do you know what? Sometimes it would be really good, as well as the feedback that I'm getting for what needs to change. It would be really nice to hear what I'm doing well with, what you think, I'm strong in. That would be really helpful for me. And, it would really balance out the fact that there's a lot of nitty-gritty feedback that comes in about things that need to be changing and things that need to be different. And her response was, I'm not going to blow smoke up your ass just because you want feedback. And so that was a real moment for me. It actually really upset me, but it did almost also make me go, well, if I'm not going to get it there, where am I going to get it? And the only place realistically was from myself. So I had to then work out, right, if I'm getting this feedback, if I'm not getting this feedback, how am I going to give that to myself? So I would then start to analyse. And I'm not going to lie, it's very tricky because sometimes you feel like you are going to be too OTT in either direction. Either you'll give yourself too much praise or too little praise. But actually, when it comes down to it, going through that process and working out where that line is for you is really important. Really important. And I just, oh no. I suddenly thought for a second I hadn't pressed record, but I had. Okay, so what did I do to help myself in that situation? So I would do an end of the day routine, a ritual almost it became really, because at this point it was the pandemic, we were working from home, and my working place was in my home, and I needed some way to break off the day. So whereas before I'd had like a 25-minute commute from the office to my home, I didn't have that anymore. And working from home on the business, I also don't have that. It is part of my world. So I needed to work out how I was going to break off the end of my day and start like my downtime. And one of the things that I started to do was an end of day ritual that was really important for me. And the relevant part of that was my wins. And I still do it now. I still do it within the business. So wins and gratitude at the end of the day. So they have to be specific to that day. So you can't say things like, I'm grateful for my family. So for example, yesterday, this was so cute, bless her. So a little while ago, I'd said to my kids, you know, for Mother's Day, it would just be really nice if you like did some jobs for me and things like that. So they bought me one of those voucher books. And we're moving house at the moment, and I found it the other day, and obviously loads of the vouchers are still in there. I've never cashed them in. Anyway, so over the Easter holidays, I had left one of these vouchers in each of my kids' bedrooms saying, before you go back to college, they're 17 and 18, I'd like my cup of tea, please, that was in this book from goodness knows how long ago. Anyway, so they chuckled and they're like, yeah, that's absolutely sure. Obviously didn't happen. So I went and spoke to them yesterday and I was like, I'm doing this thing, I'm running a bit late, I would really appreciate a cup of tea from one of you. I don't care who it is, but if one of you can bring me a cup of tea, that would be really great. So I'm sitting in this session, I've got a whole load of leaders in front of me. I think we had about 13 or 14 in the group. And my daughter, bless her, comes up. I'd let them know that somebody was coming to deliver a cup of tea. My daughter comes up and she's done me this whole tea tray. It's got a teapot and a milk jug and everything. So I had to explain to everybody, just to let you know, my daughter's just made me a cup of tea, but it's not a cup of tea, it's in a pot. So whilst we're talking about this element, I shall actually be pouring my tea from my teapot. So I hope that that's okay. So we did that, and so in my wins yesterday, one of the wins that I put in was my daughter had brought me this pot of tea, and it was really sweet. So if you're going to do wins at the end of the day, they have to be specific to the end of that particular day. And having those wins in can help you then to say, I'm doing a good job. You know, I got some stuff done today. And for me, a big thing at the moment is things that I'm doing to look after myself. So, you know, what did I do today that was, you know, going to look after me? So wins at the end of the day is a really good way of starting to work out how you can self-validate. How can you say, I did a good job today. I achieved something today, because that's really incredibly important. So self-validation, why are we so incredibly poor at it? For me, and for the clients that I speak to who are predominantly my generation, I think some of it was our childhood and the time that existed back then. So, you know, when I was young, the idea of thinking of others before yourself was like absolutely not. Like even from brownies, and I think I was about 6 or 7 when I started brownies, you know, do a good think of other people and do a good turn every day, I'm sure was like the motto or something like that. And it was always about thinking about other people, never about yourself, never about when you'd got to capacity, never about how you were feeling about things. And if you did start focusing on yourself, or you did celebrate yourself, you were conceited or arrogant, and they were really icky things to be. So I think we were programmed throughout childhood to just say, no, other people, other people, other people, other people. And of course, it's important to consider other people. Of course, that's vital. However, not at detriment to yourself. And I spend most of my time saying to my clients, it's lovely to be kind, it's lovely to be caring, it's lovely to be nurturing, but the line is when it becomes detrimental to you. So as soon as you cross that line and it's becoming detrimental, that's when actually being kind, being caring is really damaging to you. If you continue doing it, you have capacity. If you get to that capacity, there's nothing more to give apart from your physical and your mental well-being. And I'm saying this from, you know, the stage of not that long ago having a period of burnout where I'd pushed too hard. And I know that I ignored all the signs, so I'm not perfect at this. I'm still a work in progress, as we all are. But in terms of that ability to self-validate and say, I did a good thing, that helps you then to role model to the rest of your team that celebrating wins is really important. And you can do that as a team, but they also need to recognize that for themselves as individuals. So self-validation is a really important part of emotional intelligence because it starts in here, and that's really vital. So that whole thing about conceited and arrogant then pulls into self-confidence. And if I could go back and teach myself one lesson, and one lesson that I'm continuing to learn, it would be about failure. So when we're little and we're learning to walk, we manage to kind of work out how to pull ourselves up, and we cruise around the furniture and everything when we're really little. And then we inevitably fall down. And we don't go, oh, I'm not very good at that walking malarkey, I think I won't bother anymore. We keep getting up and we keep trying. And we don't go at the end of the day, I had a really bad day with walking today. I'm so rubbish at walking. Like, those things don't happen at all. But as we get older, we become really self-critical at anything that we're not great at. Like, if you went to a salsa class, would you be expecting to be able to dance the salsa straight away? Actually, I've spoken to a few people and they're like, well, yeah, that's the problem. That's why I wouldn't go, because I expect to do that straight away. But of course, that's not realistic. And it's important to note, if you're going to start doing some sort of hobby, whether you expect to be really good at it straight away. Wouldn't it be lovely, though, to be able to just naturally be able to get up and dance? I would love that. So it's about being okay to fail. So if you do something wrong, or get something wrong, you are allowed to do that. That is okay to do that. And as long as you then take the learning from it, that is incredibly important. So when I was working in social care, failures did happen, and failures could have a really massive consequence or a big impact on somebody. So there was a lot of focus on learning in order to move forward. So whenever something happened, whenever there was an incident, instead of swooping in with blame culture, you would go in with coaching questions. Can you tell me what happened? Can you tell me the impact of this on whoever was affected? Can you tell me the impact on the business? Oh, excuse me. So all of those elements were really important in learning how to move forward. It was okay to learn from that experience as long as you didn't let it knock your confidence and affect you. So being okay at getting something wrong is a really key human behaviour that I wish we would all have handed to us on a platter. Sadly, all the things that we think we should be able to do as humans, they're pretty much all learned behaviours. So if we think that we're going to be immediately really good at leadership, then the chances are we're going to fall over a few times and get some things wrong and learn from it and move on. But when you take a situation where you have fallen down, where something hasn't gone to a plan, it's important just to take the learning and move on, because if every time you got something wrong, you allowed your self-esteem to plummet because you got something wrong, then actually you don't build the same level of resilience. And resilience in leadership is really important. And I think that now more than ever, we're in situations where we're in a huge amount of change a lot of the time. Like, businesses are changing all the time. You know, we've just changed in terms of the Prime Minister and the party leading the country. So there are then going to be further changes, particularly if you're linked to something that is a political landscape. So learning from experiences is really important, but it's having the ability to then take the rest of the stuff which you don't need anymore and bin it. You don't need the bit that blames you. You don't need the bit that affects your self-esteem. There's no benefit in that, so let it go. So And the other thing is that, particularly as a leader, you don't need to know everything. You just need to know who your go-tos are. So when you are working as a leader, and in fact, I've got an example of this just from yesterday. So I was speaking to one of my clients who was talking about this tender that she was needing to put forward to outsource for some stuff. And she was saying, I can't understand why I have to explain to my manager in such a lot of detail why we need this. And I said, because he's doing his job. He's got so many of you that are direct reports that he doesn't need to know your area. He just needs you to tell him what's going on in your area so that he can make decisions. She was like, oh, I've never thought about it like that. But when we're leaders, when we're leading people, we don't need to know the nitty-gritty of what all of those people can do. We're not there to pick up their role if they're not around, for example. So know who your go-tos are and champion them as your go-tos. And, you know, it's fine if you know that Alice is really good at X and Rob's really good at Y. And, you know, it's okay to kind of work within your team and know, right, if I need this doing, this person's really good at it. Or if I need this doing, this person's really good at it and this person wants to develop. So maybe the two of them can work together. So having the confidence to know who your go-tos are and be okay about the fact that you don't need to know everything. It's absolutely fine. So why is emotional intelligence so important? So if you think about how you would act with the opposite of emotional intelligence, there's going to be a lot of things that you're going to miss out on. So when we're talking about emotional intelligence, empathy, for example, so life happens. Some of your team may well be working full-time and life happens to them. So to be able to you know, really know who they are and understand who they are and have empathy around the difficulties they might be having, whether that be at home or at work, is incredibly important. Because if you've got somebody who you are supportive and empathetic, really, really important, you're going to get more back off them. So, for example, another client of mine who finished her sessions today, one of her things was about shifting around what she was doing work-wise. And now she's working for a company where she'd said to them, I'm really struggling. We've got a young family still, etc. It would really, really help me if I can leave at, I think it was 4:30. It doesn't really matter what the time was, but leave slightly earlier so I can be home and get them sorted out and what have you. And her boss went, okay, not 4:30, 4 o'clock, please. And if I see you here after 4 o'clock, I will chase you to go home. And it's things like that. And now she is probably one of the most valued and loyal members of staff because she got a bit back. And obviously, as her family gets older, she might choose that that's not required anymore and might then give back. But you can bet your bottom dollar that what work she does while she was there, she worked really hard. And it's things like that. If you give a bit to get a bit back, that's really important. Listening. Now, this is one key skill that I think that we think we do, but actually we don't. So within my role, I am often listening to respond. So I'm processing what a client is saying to me. I'm formulating why it's relevant, how it's relevant, and where the conversation needs to go. And then I'm saying a response of some kind to whatever it is, whether it's validation, asking a searching question, guiding the conversation in a slightly different direction. I'm always listening to respond. However, I also have to listen to understand at the same time. And when I'm with my family, I can quite often fall into listening to respond rather than listening to understand, which they're pretty good at picking me up on now. But it can be an easy thing to get into. And then you've got, it's called global listening, where what you're listening to is what's the undercurrent. So you know, don't you, when somebody's not okay. And they might say that they're okay, but you kind of know they're not. That's the kind of listening that I'm talking about, is you know that there's something unsaid. You can tell by their energy, you can tell by their body language, you can tell by the fact they're much more withdrawn or the behavior is different from normal. That's the listening part. And people skills, obviously a massive part of emotional intelligence, being able to get along with people, being able to draw the best out of people. And the best way of doing that is to really get to know your team. Like, how much do you know about your team? If you wrote the names of all of your team down and then key facts next to them, would you know all their family names? Would you know their living circumstances? Would you know their sports preferences? I don't know why that came out. Sport's not a thing for me at all. Maybe because we've just had the Euros. You know, what is it that makes them tick? Some people I know who struggle a little bit with emotional intelligence around people skills, they have a set of cards and they have a card for each of their members of staff. And as soon as they find something out, they add it on the card. There is nothing wrong with that at all. If that's what you need to do to grow your emotional intelligence, then do it. It's absolutely fine. And in fact, years ago, housewives used to have a card for each of their husband's colleagues or what have you who might come to dinner, and it would have their likes and dislikes on it. They would have, in terms of food, they would have their preferences, they would have anything that they knew about that person, family members, anything that they'd learned, so that they could be the best hostess. And quite frankly, my memory is shocking, so I would definitely need something written down. The other thing, which I think again stems back from like the 80s time, is how people like to be treated. So treat others as you would like to be treated. Please don't. That's nonsense. Just because you like somebody who is quite straightforward and straight talking does not mean that somebody in your team does. Treat them how they would like to be treated. How do they work best? So, for example, when I inherited my second child, she's my husband's child, and she came as part of the package, which was great. Whenever she and Owen were naughty when they were little, I only had to indicate to Skye that I might be possibly a little bit cross at this certain situation, and she would be mortified. With Owen, I'd proper have to spell it out for him and tell him off in order for him to feel like he'd done something wrong and he wanted to change something. So I couldn't treat my children the same. We say, I'll treat my kids all the same. You won't, because they're all their own different personalities, and really it's no different in your team. They're all going to be slightly different, motivated by slightly different things. So treat them how they would like to be treated. And in doing all of those things, you will start to nurture your team, but you'll also start to empower your team as well, because you'll get to know them as real people. You'll get to know them on an individual basis. And yes, if you've got a massive team, if you're looking after a call center, for example, and your team is enormous, this is going to be a lot more difficult. So maybe you have seniors in your team who can help you with this kind of thing. But that doesn't take away from the fact that you can get to know things about them. You can have good people skills. You can be empathetic. You can listen to them to understand what they're experiencing. And in having that toolkit of emotional intelligence, then actually what you're going to do is build a strong and loyal team, as long as everybody is pulling their weight. So emotional intelligence feels like a bit of a softer skill, a bit of a more feminine than masculine skill. And another client that I was talking to was talking about the fact that she recognizes that she's very different to other people on her senior leadership team. And we were talking about why that's a problem. And actually, she started to realize that it's not. The whole point was she was bringing something different to the table. On her senior leadership team, there are only 3 women. 2 of those women are very masculine in their energy, in terms of very straight talking, very confident, very ballsy, that kind of thing. Whereas she's not like that. She's the approachable one. She's the one that the staff can go to if there's a problem. She's much more approachable and warm and nurturing of those staff. And she acknowledges that sometimes that can be problematic, and she's put some boundaries in place. But equally, recognize the differences, particularly if you are in a very male-dominated world. It's okay for there to be differences in what you're doing, because that's kind of the point. When it comes to the diversity of a senior leadership team, part of the point of that is to be different and to bring something different to the table. It's your strengths that make you different. It doesn't mean that you are in the wrong place or you need to be more like these other people. What it does mean is that you need to recognize what's different that you bring and really start to own that. There is no need to be like everybody else. Let's not have cookie cutter managers. Let's bring different things to the table that's going to really, really help the business to move forward. So let's talk about shaping your style, because really until you have decided yourself how you are going to be as a manager, it's difficult for you to then go and manage people effectively. So when it comes to your management style, there almost needs to be a bit of a strategy around it about how you want to be, how you want to handle those situations. And one of the best exercises to do for that is to have a look at what is the next level you like, and in fact take the personality out of it. So let's say you are the chief finance officer. What do I think a chief finance officer looks like? What does she look like? How does she behave? What positive personality traits and qualities does she have? How does she hold herself? All of those things. And you'll start to see the differences of where you think you are at the moment and where you think you should be. And then you can look at what steps you can put into place. So in terms of management and leadership style, initially, whatever style you go for will be leading on your personality. So you will have a look from a personality side, and you will automatically go to a leadership kind that is more in line with your personality. One of the best places to go if you want to have a look a little bit more about the 6 different areas of leadership is Daniel Goleman, Goleman. He's got a number of books out, lots of information on the internet about his leadership styles. I don't have time to go into it massively today, but of these 6 parts of leadership that he identified, you'll have 1 or 2 that you're naturally going to be drawn to. And then in addition to that, there'll be others that are not so natural to you, but they'll be useful in different ways. So you build those up and put them in your toolbox, and then based on scenarios and situations, you can then bring those out and help everybody to be understood and to get the most out of the situation. So for example, one of them is commanding, which is very do this, do that, do the other. There's no time for talking, and most people would be like, oh my goodness, that sounds really icky. But if you've got a crisis situation, or if there's a fire drill or something happens at the business, that's actually going to be a really important style that you need to get. Like, nobody wants to discuss how we should all leave the building in a fire. You just want to get out. So there are certain times where some of those can be utilised in a really positive way, even though initially they feel a bit icky in terms of a leadership style. So shaping your style will also mean playing with it a little bit, you know, experimenting and going back to that, being okay if you try something on and it doesn't quite fit, right? Why didn't that fit? Why did that not work? X, Y, and Z, right? That's learning for next time. Let's move on. So failure is a really, really big part of being a good manager, because sometimes you're going to get things wrong. And if you get something wrong, you need to not fall over. You need to be able to continue and just take the learning from it. Actually, that's not fair. It's not about not falling over. It's about how quickly you get back up again. Resilience isn't not falling over. Resilience is when you get back up again, the more resilient you are, the quicker you'll acknowledge what's happening and be able to do things to lift yourself out of it. And then whilst you're deciding how you want to be as a leader, it's also about the vision and the purpose of your team. Like, what is it that you want your team to be known for? It's probably going to be things like great customer service, because no matter where you work in a business, you have somebody who needs your services and therefore they're your customer. It doesn't mean it's the public, but you need to know, this is what I want my team to be known for, so this is how we're going to achieve it, and this is the vision or the purpose for my actual team in terms of how it builds into the bigger picture. As a company, what is it that you're doing and how is that going to build into it? So everybody needs to know purpose. So your team is a mini ecosystem. It is a mini business and should be treated as such. And then you need to work out where it fits into the bigger picture. So one of the important things that you'll be thinking about in terms of shaping your team and shaping your style is the values within the team as well. So let's say, for example, one of your values is we are open and honest. That's great. What does it look like and what is it not? So we are open and honest might look like, if I think something isn't working well, I'm going to talk about it and have a conversation. What it's probably not is, you look rubbish in that shirt. It's about being really clear about what a value is and what it isn't. So open and honest, a person might look rubbish in their shirt in your opinion, but it's just about making sure that whatever the values are, that they're taken in the right way and they don't go too far into something that's going to be quite difficult. So values within the team are really important. What do they look like and what do they not? And just touching back on purpose, why is purpose important? So purpose is important because it's a human condition. We're programmed to need to understand what our purpose is, why we are here, what we contribute. And a shockingly few amount of people ever get to find out. Some people don't need to know. They just need to come in, do the job and go home again, and they don't care. But predominantly people do need to know what their purpose is and how they fit into something bigger than themselves. So I would always err on the side of caution and treat your team as if everybody needs to know what their purpose is and what they're doing, because the vast majority of them probably will, and there might be a few here and there who are just here to get the job done. So purpose is important because when we lived in much smaller groups, in tribes, and essentially any collection of people is like its own mini tribe, people had to know what their purpose was, because if they didn't have a purpose and they weren't contributing in any way, then they were a drain on the tribe. If they were a drain on the tribe, instead of producing or giving anything back, there was the possibility that you could be ousted from the tribe. And if you were ousted, that meant you were alone. And if you were alone, that meant you were probably not going to survive. So purpose was important because that was where you fitted into the tribe. That was your contribution, and therefore you were safe. So people need to know their purpose because it's a safety thing. It helps them to work out how they are safe. So make sure they know how they play into the bigger picture. So for example, if you're working in finance in a big company, it's very easy to kind of get lost in the numbers. But actually, if you're finance for something like social housing, you're making sure that all of the money is accounted for, and therefore there's as much as possible to invest in services that are going to really help people's lives. Now, when you're working in finance in social housing, you might not think about that, but actually the bottom line of what you're doing is making sure that there is enough money in order to support services on the ground for people who, you know, might be in really difficult situations. So people who have been homeless who are coming into social housing, people who are victims of domestic violence, asylum seekers, lots of people where it's life and death for them. So your little job that you see as being, I'm just this, actually, when you break it down, it's not a little job, it's a big job, because actually what it contributes to is important. So don't allow any of your team to say, I am just a, nobody is just an anything. There is always a bigger picture. The next thing is differing strengths. There are lots and lots and lots of different personality and psychometric testing out of there, and you can utilize them as long as it's within your business's policies and what have you, to work out who it is that you're getting in your team. Now, when I first started employing a team, I made the mistake of employing people like me. I thought that that would work best. That's nonsense. You don't need people who are like you. You need people who are going to fill in the gaps that you can't give. So make sure that you're bringing in people who've got differing strengths. Don't make everybody like you, because all that you'll end up with is a lot of people who say yes a lot and never offer an alternative solution. And you're also not going to be building your leadership styles based on the fact that you've got everybody who's like you. So let's take one of them, for example. So there's one psychometric testing where you just get a colour or a couple of colours. So there's red and yellow, green and blue. And if you employ people who are all in like the very hyper organised parts, then maybe you're not getting the creative people who are more visionary and can give alternative perspectives on things. So you shouldn't employ people within your team who are just like you. You need to employ people who are going to complement each other in order for you guys to be a high-performing team. Building trust is the very first thing that happens in any team, and it will happen again, and you'll go back to that level as soon as something changes within the business, something changes within the structure of the team, or you get a new team member or members. You will go back to building trust. So in order to become a high-performing team, nothing really happens until you have got that trust level on the beginning. So what happens is when you put people together who are new, there's lots of dancing of, I'm not going to put myself out there. I'm not going to say anything should change. I'm going to be ultra polite. I'm going to listen to everybody. I'm going to take it all in. I'm not going to rock the boat. I'm not going to acknowledge my own weaknesses. I'm just going to find my way. And that takes time. So building trust is never a thing that you can do really quickly. What you can do is lose it like that. It can go really incredibly quickly. So in terms of building trust, there are different things that you can do. So it's getting to know people again. It's allowing them space in a social capacity. So I've got a number of people that when they're talking about teams and how they manage their teams, a lot of them are hybrid working, and they will do things like, you can't talk about work at all in this social call. It's just have a drink on a Friday afternoon and just chat, and it's not work related at all. Really good things, and things like that build trust. People get to know each other better. People get to know who are their sort of people, and that can be really, really helpful, alongside just seeing how people work. Like, people will stand back and kind of look at how other people tick, and kind of work out from there whether they feel that they're trustworthy or not. So building trust within your team is one of the most important foundations, and without it, the other stuff can't happen. You're not going to have a high-performing team without being able to build that trust in the first place. Communication within your team obviously is very important as well. And you need to make sure that you're building the opportunity for people to come and communicate with you. So let's say, for example, you've got a project meeting and you've got your whole team in this project meeting, and you've got lots of different people who have differing views and what have you. You're also going to have people who are at different places on the scale between introverted and extroverted. I don't believe in giving somebody a label as one or the other. They might have a preference, but that doesn't necessarily mean one or the other. So, for example, I'm very extroverted generally, but when I've had enough, I'm beyond introverted. I don't want to be with anybody. I don't want to speak to anybody. I like silence. I like time by myself. So I can go to either end of the scale quite rapidly. I don't often sit in the middle very much. I'm sure that will surprise you if you know me quite well. So in terms of having that communication, if you're going to have a brainstorming session as a team, what happens to the people who might not want to speak up in the team meeting? Do you give them the opportunity to talk to you outside of that? Because if you don't, that's really important. So make sure you're having regular communications with your team as a team, and also on a one-to-one basis, and decide on how transparent you want to be. So often you'll be privy to information that you won't want your team to know. So you need to decide how transparent you're going to be about the information that's going to be shared with your team. Okay. Apologies for the cough. I've had bronchitis a few weeks ago, and it's still just tickling away there, particularly when I'm talking for a long time. The next thing is boundaries, because we've now started to build this team, but what you want to do is make sure that they have got the ability to kind of get on by themselves as much as possible. So in terms of boundaries, you need to work out what is acceptable and what is not acceptable from your team, but also from other people. So let me just tie this into the danger of an open door policy. If you feel that you should always be available and that therefore you have an open door policy because that's the right thing to have, be prepared to get interrupted a huge amount. If you have an open door policy, that is telling people that at any point they can come and take your time, and there is no restriction to that. So by all means, make sure your team know that they can come and talk to you. But having an open door policy will often mean that you'll get interrupted. So you decide what's going to work in terms of that. So there's two main things that you can do. So if you want to get on with some work and somebody comes to you, can I talk to you about this? You can do one of two things. You can either, not right now, I'm just in the middle of this. I really want to give you some time to talk to me about this. I'm free at X. Would that work for you? So that's one thing that you can do. The other thing that you can do is condition people in your office to know that unless it's, you know, the equivalent of your child bleeding or their arm falling off, that you can't be interrupted. And that would be like putting headphones on or something like that. And obviously on Teams, there are things that you can do to kind of turn off and say, do not disturb. So it's just making sure that you know what's okay, what's not okay, and what am I going to do about it if it happens. And one of the biggest things that I get is I just can't get on with my work. I can't get on with what needs to be done. Sometimes that's because of poor meeting culture as well, where you just ricochet from one meeting to another, having no time to do your actual job. And then again, you know, boundaries around that. Do you need to be there? Do you need to be there for the whole time of that meeting, or could you contribute and go? So it's just important to sort of work out, what do I need and how am I going to get it in terms of boundaries? Because some of the things that happen, you have to take ownership and responsibility for, that you are allowing that to happen. So have some responses ready for some of the behaviours that you don't want, so that you can crack on and do what you need to do. Also, if you're talking about how to grow your team, and we're talking about purpose for that, and that means that you have real clarity about what your team do. If you have real clarity about what your team do, it gives you the ability then, when somebody tries to put some additional work on you, that you can turn around and say, that doesn't fit in with our remit, but I suggest you speak to X in the other team, because I think actually that fits better with them. So what you do is you start saying no to certain things, which has a little section of its own in just a moment. So I'm hoping very much that this is useful to you so far. And so I just wanted to take the opportunity to talk to you about working with me, as I have some session slots that have come available. So I've got 3 session slots at the moment for one-to-one client. And so whenever we work one-to-one, it means that I can bespoke a lot of the things that I'm talking about today to you. We can do proper work on you as an individual, the story that you're holding on to, and how that's playing into you being a leader or becoming a leader. And in the one-to-one sessions, we can work through your inner story and start to break it down. And we do that through a 7-step framework called Success. And that is your surroundings, so your environment in terms of people and places. We talk about up-leveling, how we can up-level you from where you are now to where you want to be. We talk about competencies, so leadership competencies, which I'm going to speak a little bit more about in a second. We also then have core beliefs and where they've come from, embodying your values, because the more you work aligned with your values, the more likely you are to have real fulfillment and purpose within your role. And then we have your relationship with yourself, and then also your soul purpose. So we discuss those and work through those to kind of work out a new vision of you. And a lot of that is also about validating how you've been feeling about some things and starting to help you to trust in your intuition a little bit more. So it's great for people who are struggling with overthinking, imposter syndrome, procrastination, a lack of confidence, a lack of boundaries, and anxiety, whether that be work-based or at home. And then the leadership competencies that go around it, around delegation, listening, growing emotional intelligence, and leadership mindset. So it's a real holistic approach, because however you are at home will merge into work and vice versa. So it's about taking a holistic approach which helps you in your career, but also helps you in your personal relationships. So you can start working with me from £750. But the people who get the most are the people who invest in the longer program, which is 13 sessions, 1-to-1, 60 minutes. We work together over a period of time, and that can be anything between 4 and 10 months. You have your sessions within that, and the investment for that is £3,500. So regardless of what your budget is, come and have a chat with me and we can see which area fits in best with you. There's various options in between those as well. I have lots of testimonials that I can send you as well, so that you can have a look at what other people have said about me. And if you want to know a little bit more about me and my energy and what I can help you with, then also I do have a podcast on all major platforms called The Inner Success Story. And I'm just about to start recording season 3, and season 2 will be available on Spotify imminently, and I will keep you posted on that. So let me know if you would like to work with me. You can respond to any of the emails that you're getting about this podcast, and you can also reach out to me on LinkedIn and connect with me if you would like to. So let's carry on with some of the other challenges. So some of the things that you might want to have a think about. So you have a lot of pull on you as a manager, in terms that you've got people above you as well as people below you. And one of the best questions that I've discovered that I wanted to pass on to you, but it didn't really fit into any category, so I've kind of done a bit of a miscellaneous section, is talking to your manager, and if you are concerned about saying no to them when they ask you to do something, this is a really powerful question and very helpful. And that is, how do you want me to say no to you? How do you want me to say no to you? And that's really important, in terms of they can then explain to you. I mean, obviously, some of them are going to laugh and say, I don't want you to say no. No, really, how do you want me to say no to you? Because you're not going to be able to say yes to absolutely everything. And that can be really beneficial if your manager is able to tell you, what's the best way of me doing that? The next thing is conflict. So we're programmed to feel quite uncomfortable around conflict, but actually conflict is a key part of building a team. You are always going to experience conflict, and sometimes that can be in a really positive way, like, I don't think we should do it this way, I think we should do it that way, no, that's rubbish, etc., etc., and everybody kind of gets into that. But actually then you can come out with really good solutions for it that are already bought into by the team, because they've had part of that discussion has been with them. Conflict isn't always a challenge. Conflict can be a really useful thing. Obviously, there are going to be times that you need to step in when there's conflict between two members of your team, but learning how to deal with conflicting opinions is important within the team. The team should be able to, particularly as they're getting towards high performing, they should be able to be calling each other out on stuff. They should be able to hold each other accountable for stuff. And so actually conflict is an important part, as long as it's dealt with appropriately. And it means that you're going to get better ideas out there, because people are happy to put their head up and say, this isn't right, this doesn't work, we need to change this, I think this. That's a really important thing for people within your team to be able to feel comfortable about doing. Change. This needs a whole thing of its own. But whenever you've got change happening within your team, the best way to approach it is to think about, where is the opportunity? So every time significant change has happened in my life that I have felt initially was very negative, actually it's always turned out to be the best. And actually going a bit further than that, really, on a couple of occasions where I was made redundant, I already wanted to leave the company anyway, or I'd already had a number of nudges that were like, this isn't the place for you anymore. And there's nothing wrong with that. So sometimes when you get a shove, it's the universe going, I gave you a ton of options. I gave you lots of clues and you decided to completely ignore them. So now we're going to push you into a situation where something has got to change. Difficult conversations, again, is a whole other session of its own. But my 3 top tips for this really are: plan it in advance, know what it is that you're asking for, and know what it is that you want to get out of it in terms of an agreement to move forward, so that you have got the ability not to get flustered by the other person then telling you their part. So preparation is powerful. And then time prioritization is another area which I think I'll pick up with you as well at another point, just to get you to understand the reasons why we procrastinate. And when you dig around a bit in procrastination, you'll generally find there's something fear-based in there. So sometimes it's going to be you just get on and do it. And sometimes it's going to be, right, I need to work through something here. And it's about being curious, like be curious with yourself as a person, but be curious with yourself as a leader as well. So today we have covered yourself and how you start inside in terms of being a manager, emotional intelligence, the joy of standing out, your management style, creating your team as if it's a mini business or mini ecosystem, boundaries, and just brushed on some of the other challenges that can happen as well. So that's a very zoomed out overview of some of the key areas of leadership. And I will be looking at providing other information via webinars in the next few weeks as well, about other things that I'll be talking about. In addition to that, on Thursday, the 1st of August, my new season of my podcast will be starting to be recorded. Now, the way I do this is I do all of my recordings as open sessions on LinkedIn on a Thursday morning at 9:30. So they will be starting again on the 1st of August. They are most Thursdays, but just to let you know that there are 2 key things happening. We're moving house, actually 3 key things. My son's going to university and my daughter's starting her residential apprenticeship with EasyJet in aircraft maintenance. So as a result, there will be some Thursdays where there won't be a session being recorded, simply because I'm taking up with other activities. But it would be lovely to see you at any of them. I really hope you've enjoyed it. I've certainly enjoyed coming and talking to you about it, and I look forward to seeing you soon. And hopefully I'll hear from some of you in terms of about working with me, and then we can have further chats and see where that takes us. So have a great day and enjoy taking some of this and putting it into practice. Thank you very much.